Well, let me start here. So on my way here to Nesson today, I had a chance to chat with Jack Edwards. And I would not be in this spot, since we were talking about people to thank, I would not be in this spot without Jack's help, his support, and his friendship. He and I hit it off immediately once I came to the Bruins in 2017. I walked onto the team charter with a ski magazine. I don't know if anybody reads magazines anymore, like actual magazines. And he saw it, and he took out a cocktail napkin on the plane, and he drew a map of New England. And on it, he put the dots where all the ski resorts were located. I still have that note somewhere, and we hit it off immediately. But Jack was the best. For 19 seasons, an original. He loved his Bruins. He would bring that passion to every broadcast, and he did some phenomenal work with Brick and the Nesson crew for so long. And I'm so thankful for his support.
Judd, your resume is incredible. I want to give you your flowers. 2 original 6 hockey teams on the resume. Some baseball team named the Cubs. You're a Michigan man. Congrats on the Natty, by the way.
Go Blue, baby!
I mean, is this career of yours what you drew up? Because I always go back to the genesis of all of us wanting to get into sports and wanting to get into broadcasting. I mean, is this what you drew up? Is this going the way you predicted? Has it taken turns? Give me your life story. No pressure.
Well, let's start here. So when I was 13 or 14, and the short story is I was introduced to the game, and I saw Dennis Savard, who was a superstar for the Blackhawks back in the 80s, and I heard Pat Foley doing the game. And I was a huge sports junkie and an athlete growing up, but I played everything but hockey. It just wasn't as readily available in the Chicago suburbs then when I was growing up the way it is now. But I loved sports, but I heard Pat, I saw Savvy, and from that point forward, the light bulb went off. This is what I want to do. But getting from that point to where I am now, it's different for everybody. I think if you talk to guys around the National Hockey League, I mentioned Jack Edwards, if you talk to Jack or some of the other guys around the National Hockey League, I think everybody's path to get to this point is a little bit different. So for years, and I was this way, and we can certainly talk about this, like I've had plenty of mentors in the past. Doc Emmerich was a guy for me. I wrote Doc a letter back when I was in high school. We've been friends ever since, and he's been a massive help throughout this entire process since I was a teenager. Mm-hmm. But I will get calls from other kids who are aspiring to get to the National Hockey League. And one of the things that I do tell them is that everybody's path to get to the National Hockey League is a little bit different. Do you start in a big market, then get an opportunity? Do you go and wind your way through the East Coast Hockey League, the American Hockey League? The International Hockey League isn't around anymore. Moment of silence for that league. Thank you. That's where I met Brick and Beersy when those guys were playing back in the 95-96 season. So it's a little bit different for everybody to get to this point. But Travis, to your point, I was thinking about it last night, just how fortunate I have been to have these opportunities and meet these people.
It's almost like
learn.
It's almost like the athletes we cover, right? Not everybody's path is the same. Mm-hmm. Some get drafted, some are undrafted. So it's a lot like that in broadcasting as well.
Oh, there's no question about it. And listen, I think certainly luck and timing are a big part of that. My first full-time foray as a hockey play-by-play announcer was with the Chicago Wolves. I spent 12 years in the IHL and the American Hockey League working for the Wolves. And at the time, when they started back in 1994, the last place that I thought a minor league franchise would begin would be in an original 6 city. But they came, and part of the whole idea was, just so you guys know, is you couldn't get a ticket to a Blackhawks game back in the day. It was 18,676. And it was full every night. The Blackhawks had gone to the Stanley Cup Final in 1992. You couldn't get in.
Yeah. Wow.
So the guys that brought the Wolves to Chicago, their whole idea was, I think that there's a bigger hockey market out there for people who want to see the game. So we're going to bring some really good hockey to them, and that's the way the Wolves came into being. And I was fortunate at the time to be in Chicago. They started, part of the reason that I wound up there, I was working in sports radio. So my first full-time gig coming out of the University of Michigan was sports radio was just starting. And I started a place called The Score. Mike Greenberg and I started together.
Wow.
Jesse Rogers and I started together. We were all right at the ground floor back in 1992.
That's amazing.
So we were all producers. We all became hosts and reporters and anchors for the station. Wow. So because of that, I started to learn some of the other media members. I started to learn a little bit different parts of the craft. But for the ownership group of the Wolves, what they wanted when they came in '94 is, listen, we not only need someone who can do the games and do the games on radio. They already had a television announcer, a guy named JP Dellacamera, awesome guy, and I'm very thankful getting a chance to meet JP and spend some time with him. But they needed somebody who could try and get some traction in the media, get some stories placed. So when I went in and I interviewed, they asked, do you know the top anchor at ABC? Yeah. Do you know the lead columnist at the Chicago Tribune? I'm like, yeah. So I think all of those things kind of helped in the process. I knew them. And I had also done some games as a student at the University of Michigan. I did some college hockey with a program that doesn't even exist anymore.
Wow.
In the University of Illinois at Chicago.
Okay.
For a couple of seasons. So they knew that I had done some hockey and I had a hockey background, but they also needed somebody who could help. But again, that's a longer story, but the bigger picture is that I was so fortunate that I had those opportunities, and then all of a sudden something that I never could have envisioned popped up.
Wow.
Do you still pinch yourself that it was 9 seasons calling Blackhawks games, last 7 seasons with the Bruins? Because if you're going to do it in 2 cities, there's nothing like Chicago. There's nothing like Boston, New York when you're talking about hockey, and obviously there's some cities in Canada. But also to be along for those Stanley Cup runs. And as a hockey fan, 2 original 6 franchises at the level that Chicago and Boston were.
It was incredible. Again, I could have never envisioned having that opportunity to work for the Blackhawks and now to have this opportunity with the Bruins. The dream that I had as a kid at 13 or 14, the reality right now, stepping in that booth with Brick and getting a chance to work with the crew at Nesson, the reality is even better than anything I ever dreamed. Mm-hmm. So I was so fortunate to spend, it was 9+ seasons with the Blackhawks. And I'll tell you an interesting story. So before I came and started here in 2017, I had to audition for the gig on radio. And it just so happened, and again, this is where luck and timing falls in. So they picked a game where it was the Bruins against the Blackhawks at TD Garden.
Wow.
So I'm like, okay, well, I know half of this.
Yeah.
So that was incredibly fortunate. Listen, there are so many people that I had a chance to learn from while I was there. It was such a great experience, and I'm incredibly fortunate that I was able to have that experience. And then you want to, again, talk about something that I never envisioned. I never knew that the Cubs were going to be on my radar.
Right.
So, but again, luck and timing. So there was a guy named Corey Provis, who's now the television voice of the Minnesota Twins. Corey was doing the Cubs at the time. He was doing, you'd do the 5th inning of play-by-play, you'd host pregame and postgame, fill in for Pat Hughes. Corey left to go work with Bob Uecker and the Brewers.
Wow.
To get a full-time gig. So at the time, and this was the first year that the Blackhawks were on WGN as the new flagship. Again,
wow.
Luck and timing. My boss at the time, another guy I have to thank, and that's Dave Ennett. Dave asked me, I'll never forget, I was at this freezing cold, the old practice facility of the Blackhawks. And for anybody here with the Bruins that remembers Wilmington, kind of similar.
That's a legendary barn back in the day.
Exactly. All right. Now envision the same thing. This was just outside of O'Hare, in an industrial park called The Edge. And I remember getting a call from Dave, and he said, hey, have you ever done any baseball? And I had done some independent league baseball. I played baseball in high school. I said, yeah, I've done some. And I auditioned for that job, and I was fortunate to land it. And I spent 6 unbelievable years with the Chicago Cubs. That was, again, something I could have never imagined, but there's so much luck and timing that goes into it.